it helped that colleges were always like, we want really well-rounded applicants. And I would sort of use that to like convince myself of like, oh, see, it's okay to be a bit of a jack of all trades. Like when something happens in my life, I don't think of it as like, oh, this just happened because this had a probability of happening. I'm like, what plot point is this in my life, or what is the significance or the theme of this? I think in my life right now, I don't have the flexibility that I would like to just be able to like dive into something based off of how I feel. I think I'm trying to build that lifestyle for myself, but I'm just not there yet. And I do think that that is the ideal for the polymath.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. This time we're talking to Madeleine Gagne, a computer science PhD student, writer, interconnective bridge between mathematical modeling and storytelling. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Hey there, Dustin. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk more about what it means to be a polymath.
I'm excited to have you here. We talked a little bit one time just on an off recording on a different call, and I just remember us nerding out about different things enjoying the conversation. So I figured on a call like this is going to just get way out of hand.
We're going to like bounce off of each other. We're just going to become like a sounding board, and we'll come out of this with like 15 new ideas of how to do stuff. So I love it. I love it.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. That's why I do the show. And so the way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay. So I am probably about 30 Altoid boxes away from breaking the world record of Altoid box tin dominoes, which is apparently a thing. I obsessively eat Altoids. I eat like 2 tins a week, which is pretty bad. And it's continually gotten worse too. It used to be 1 tin a week, and now it's 2 tins a week. It's like cigarettes, I think, for me. It's getting worse and worse. So yeah, there we go. I'm an obsessive Altoid eater.
I wish I had an Altoid right now that we're talking about it.
There we go. I should just send them to people. Like, well, maybe that's my holiday gift, is I send people boxes of Altoids. But there we go.
I wonder what the adverse effect of having too many Altoids would be.
That's such a great question. Well, and it's really interesting too, because apparently Altoids were created to help with like stomach pain and stuff. So I'm like, am I addicted to some type of like stomach medicine now? I have no idea.
Very much so.
Really, honestly, I'll be the guinea pig. If there's a problem or a medical issue with eating too many Altoids, I will be the one to figure it out. So you can use me as like your canary in the coal mine.
You hear it, scientists? We found her. Well, speaking of scientists, so what was your mindset 5 years ago and how have you changed since then?
Oh man. Okay. 5 years ago, I would say I was probably struggling to get a better idea of what the word strategy meant to people. I was really interested in strategy, both because it had these computational connotations, but it also had these really like social and conversational, political connotations as well too. So I was trying to wrap my head around the fact that I loved strategy games. I loved things like chess, and I loved how they could be modeled mathematically, but I didn't know what those fields or I guess like tech or ideas were called. And it's a collection of a number of really small fields. So it was like a 5-6 year journey of figuring out where that niche was in there to study strategy computationally. And it was one that spanned a bunch of different disciplines, which is what's sort of leading to a lot of this like interdisciplinary, A-disciplinary work that I do as well too. But I think, there was just sort of like an infatuation with that word, like strategy, and trying to figure out and pinpoint what part of that word I wanted to be focused in on studying going forward.
I love that. And strategy to me has always been very interesting as well. Like going from like the Art of War, something like that, to even 48 Laws of Power, something along the lines of more interpersonal kind of way, but even just in society and a bigger scale as well.
Definitely. And like there's an art to it. And what does it mean to have an art to computation? And how do art and science interact? And what is art and what is science? When does science become art? When does art become science? I think that sort of like intersection and sort of spectrum is definitely what led me to a lot of what I
Mm.
study today. So, yeah.
Well, and essentially too, with your whole education path, you created your own way. Essentially, created your own degree. So how did that end up
Yeah,
occurring?
definitely. Oh, yeah. No, and this is so much fun too. And I loved in our prior conversations about getting to learn that there are other programs in the world that
Hmm.
do this as well too. But my main reason for applying to Duke and deciding to go to Duke University was because they had this thing called Program 2, which essentially anything that was like a normal bachelor's degree, it would fall into what was called like a Program 1. You had your sort of set course trajectory, but Program 2 was this created like alternate path where you could essentially piece together your own curriculum, and you'd put together almost like an academic committee, a lot like
Mm.
a doctoral committee that would sort of advise and look over this curriculum and make sure that what you were getting was worthy of a bachelor's of science or worthy of a bachelor's of arts degree. And so a lot of what I was interested in doing, I was really interested in that math related to decision science. So I ended up
Mm.
taking a lot of courses, it was fundamentally based around the math major. So it is very much a bachelor's of science in mathematics,
Mm.
but also taking courses in psychology and in political science. And in my case, also a little bit of evolutionary anthropology and decision science as well, too, to just really piece together this, full blooded like picture of,
Holistic, yeah.
yeah, of what strategy was. And it was really exciting, but it's also something that I feel like you're always secretly like kind of judging yourself against too, because you're taking this new trail. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, am I making a new path or am I just headed off, to the middle of nowhere also? So, yeah.
So it definitely reminds me of my own educational journey as well, because
Wow.
I looked around the world for a degree that I wanted to do, and I didn't quite realize that I wanted a modular approach to it, or a disciplinary
Mhm.
approach, if you will, to it. But I decided to create my own, and so I literally created a system to like learn from courses and podcasts and
Right.
everything online to make it. But had I known that like Duke or other universities had something similar to have this interdisciplinary studies, because sure, there's like those. If you look at some normal, not normal, but like lower level kind of traditional
Mhm.
colleges, they'll have the interdisciplinary studies, but it's
Right.
generally just like, okay, you take a couple extra electives, that's about it. It's not like what you did where you actually had multiple disciplines.
No, that's so fair. And I mean, they are so hidden and just not talked about. And I feel like a lot of what I loved us getting to talk about too is that it's a really weird world to try and be someone
Mm.
interdisciplinary and try and be a polymath too, because it's very contrary to how society has us normally act as like
Yeah.
people who are experts or we specify in one particular thing. And so those programs, those opportunities, they aren't as avidly talked about as they should be, and they're really hidden, they're really hard to find. And definitely I feel like what we end up doing as people who are striving to be polymaths or polymaths is like just trying to piece together that experience. Like it feels like we're like making quilts. Maybe that's the like old Midwestern woman in me. Like it feels like we're patchworking things together with what we have and what we can find. And that in and of itself is a really exciting and interesting way to learn as well too, in a very self-guided way.
I love the way you said that, and it's definitely interesting to think about the system of specialists is only about 100 years old since the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution. Before that, we definitely had
Yeah.
a lot more generalists, and even since then, we've had entrepreneurs and other people who have embodied that more
Right.
generalist approach, but we haven't had the societal kind of support for it. And I think now that the Web3 kind of world's going into this certain way, and content creators and the way the internet's going, we're kind of building this new digital
Yeah.
renaissance, if you will.
I love that. I love that. Oh, definitely. We're bringing back the sort of renaissance human with our new technologies. I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a great way of saying that.
And something that I heard in one of your TEDx talks was that you're crippling addicted to stories. And so, can you explain that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I feel like the best way to convey this, I love the book A Wrinkle in Time.
Mm.
And there's a character in A Wrinkle in Time called Mrs. Who only speaks in quotes from books and other authors. And I've always felt like I've related to that so much, is that I feel like I live my life and understand my life based off of stories and characters and plot beats. Like when something happens in my life, I don't think of it as like, oh, this just happened because this had a probability of happening. I'm like, what plot point is this in my
Mm.
life, or
Yeah.
what is the significance or the theme of this? And I would say that that's sort of how I'm cripplingly addicted to stories. It's like a pair of glasses that I see the world through.
It's a good
But I think
lens.
a lot of my like, work that I've done is also that I think it's glasses that a lot of other people see the world through as well too.
Mhm.
And I think we all relate and see the world through a number of different stories. And I think understanding the stories with which people contextualize their lives is how we really come to understand how humans make decisions and how they make choices and how we can better communicate with people too.
Oh, this kind of reminds me of something that I don't know if I've ever really talked about on the show before, but you might like it because I think you're a bit of a gamer as well. And so, something that I've always kind of thought about is like from Harvest Moon to Mass Effect, there's a lot of ways to interact with different
Mm.
characters and different things you can do to increase the affection of that character towards your character.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and like dialogue trees and stuff like that. And I sometimes approach certain conversations like that as like a
yeah.
dialogue tree. Like which option is going to be the Paragon choice? Which one's the Renegade choice in the sense of Mass Effect? Or how do I get that person's affection level higher, like in
Yeah.
Harvest Moon or something like that? And it's a
Oh,
silly way of doing it, but by gamifying it, it does make you more focused on the conversation.
oh, definitely, definitely. And it's totally a tool and it's a great way of contextualizing things. I love that so much. And while, I may have done TED Talks and I may be speaking eloquently here, I'm still someone who's terrified of social interaction sometimes too. So those like sort of maps of like, oh, I'm going to talk about this or I'm going to mention this. Oh man, it can take a lot of anxiety off of your shoulders too. So,
Well, and don't worry, you can be plenty relaxed here, and the flow of this conversation is always kind of interesting because generally there's three topics that kind of pop up throughout each interview, and we'll
okay,
circle back through each one basically. And so over the course of the video, we might have different circles, and eventually you'll have that circular ending, and it's just interesting how that happens almost
awesome.
naturally, which is crazy to me. But since you like systems, I thought I'd mention it.
Oh, heck yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
So, from books to video games, there's a ton of ways of experiencing stories. Do you have any one that stands out at this moment?
Oh man. So specifically like books and movies and media.
Well, I mean, anywhere between books, the movies, video games, whichever one comes up to mind first.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I I feel like this discredits me as someone who's a writer, but I do actually feel like I like movies more than books sometimes. Oh man, all of the authors and writers I know are going to get so mad at me for saying that because
Where's
it's
the pitchfork?
classically right. Classically, you're supposed to say, "Oh, the book was better than the movie," which like books are enjoyable in their own way, and I love reading because it feels much more intimate. It feels like you're having a one-on-one conversation with the author, and I really love that. So I
Mhm.
think books were kind of my first like love of media, and I definitely grew up in a family that was a little bit more like accustomed to the arts and much more trained in the arts. So I was definitely someone who was encouraged to read a lot. And I would say sci fi was probably what grabbed my attention the most growing up.
Yeah.
But I also always loved action and adventure. And I know my first TED Talk talks about it, but I swear when I watched Indiana Jones for the first time, I think it captured my entire life from then on. I'm like, this is so cool. And Indiana Jones, Star Wars, like all of these really classic, media titans. A lot of what I love to learn is that a lot of them are inspired by classic pulp fiction literature, which I didn't really know and begin investigating until I got to college and started learning about the basis. And so I really started getting invested and just fascinated in what stories and what writing had really set the precedent to, launch these huge media behemoths,
Mhm.
but also, sort of like give us characters, archetypes, structural, systems in narratives that are tropes that rule sort of storytelling in today's world. It's really interesting to see how like media stacks upon media to build how we think about stories today too.
Well, like I often say too, still like an artist because they're learning how to transform a piece of work into something new.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think. So Indiana Jones is a great one. The Mummy, I always love The Mummy because it's also very like jokey Indiana Jones.
Hmm.
Books, Wrinkle in Time, love anything by Donna Tartt. Really, 2 years ago I read The Final Girl Support Group and absolutely love that. If it's got some sort of like meta commentary on
Hmm.
like a trope or archetype, that's something that I just absolutely love. But I also have to throw out, I feel like a real game changer for me. I mean, I'm geeky. I play games, and like so it's probably pretty obvious that I watch a lot of anime as well too, but I am a ride or die fan of Neon Genesis Evangelion and have been for years, and it's such an existential anime that really takes apart the structure of anime and of this sort of like Japanese storytelling technique. And I think that in many ways that is what got me hooked on studying, sort of this idea of like computational narratology. Like, how do we study how stories and patterns in stories affect the world today? And how could we computationally model that sort of cause and effect decision making?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely, a lot of people would necessarily know that anime has a very long history of complex storytelling.
Yeah.
And while I haven't watched the show, I recently came across the intro music to it because of TikTok, and now I can't stop
So
listening to
good.
the intro song.
It's so good. No, and like,
It
oh my
is.
gosh, I saw someone do like a gospel choir rendition of it, and that was just like incredible. It really is this like biblical, story in many ways, which it's so ironic because the director claims that he just put the biblical references in because they look cool, and his whole fan base is like, I don't know about that, but oh god, it's so good. It literally, that intro song sounds like you're like ascending to heaven or something.
Real quick, a little side tangent here. I think the first time I heard it was actually an AI cover because one of my
Oh,
favorite
really?
bands that have sang and listened to for a long time is Queen, and so it's Freddie
Oh,
Mercury singing it. So I'll have to send
oh
it to
my
you
God,
afterwards.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, and I have there is an incredible anime music video. This is really showing just how much of a geek I am here. That's edited to Bohemian Rhapsody that I have to send you then because it's just,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's incredible. Anyways, love Queen. Queen is the best. Classic rock for the win.
Yes. This show is known for its tangents, so keep that in
Oh,
mind.
I love it. I love it.
How do you sorry. How do you balance comp sci and your writing careers?
Oh man, that's a great question. And I think that it's a schedule that kind of changes and shifts as the year goes on. So like summers look different than
Mm.
academic semesters for obvious
Mm.
reasons. I do tend to let during summers my comp sci maybe sit on the back burner a little bit and investigate the literary side of things a lot more. I'm like, I'll let comp sci have the 2/3 of the year for the academic semesters, and then I'll let my writing run a little bit wild during the summer. But during the semesters, I would say,
Oh, I lost you.
classic 9 to 5. Maybe it's 9 to 9 sometimes with the comp sci, Monday through Friday. So comp sci during the semesters, normally I let it run the 9 to 5. Sometimes it's 9 to 9 if you're getting a
Mm.
bug in your code there. But I like to see if I can save my weekends to have at least like a day out of the weekend to just really write and
Okay.
enjoy the writing process there. But yeah, but hey, I really party hard on Friday afternoons. So, we just got to really have our Fridays be as optimally enjoyable as possible. So,
I understand. And it's weird to me hearing how people schedule their days. This is just a tangent that my brain wanted to go on with you because I'm curious where you come from and where your brain is at. Because you're saying basically during the year, you're focusing more on comp side, and during the summer, you're more focused, academic year, I should say. And in the summertime, you're focused more on writing. Whereas, like, some
yeah,
other people might be a little bit more like mixed together. Like even during the academic year, they might be embedded. Like if they do ballet, they might still be doing ballet practice in between
yeah,
different labs or something like that for their academic stuff. And then for me personally, I don't really have seasons per se. Like I have like
yeah,
the weather. I don't really have like academic year to worry
yeah.
about, and so I have to kind of balance my own phases or focuses.
Super fair.
And it's just interesting to think about how you might adapt once you might like move on to another type of life,
Yeah,
jobs or
yeah.
whatever you might do.
Definitely. And I really love your mention of it being like weather too.
Mm.
Like that it's like sometimes you're feeling more of one thing than another. And I love that. And I think that that is like the ideal for a polymath too. Like to be able to give yourself the schedule flexibility and the, just, I guess, like capacity to move and alter your day around
Yeah.
what you're feeling and what you're inspired to be doing. Like 100%. I think that's where you should be at. And that's ideally where I feel like I would like to be at as well too. I'm still constrained by semesters, but when I get older or hopefully, have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule, I'd love to be there too, to just, be able to go in on that impulse and what I'm feeling on any given day. Oh, that'd be perfect.
It is nice to be able to kind of do that a bit. And I will say that time management for polymaths is something that a lot of people need to work on. It's something I've written about quite a bit because I still fail at it. And
Oh, that's so fair.
we were talking about before the call, I'm not feeling very well. And it's one of those things where the last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I had a lot of things to do, especially since I came from a conference. So I had to catch up. And so like I'm starting to like get sick and I'm trying to catch up and I'm like, oh man, I had to contact all the people I messaged back there. I had to do this, this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
And then I'd wake up some days at just 50% energy, right? And so you
Right.
never know what your day is going to be like. And it's kind of a better example of, I used to have personal training clients, and anytime they came in, maybe they had a bad day at work or school. Maybe they didn't really wake up with much energy or didn't eat that much that day. So their energy levels fluctuate by the time they get to you. Their emotions fluctuate by the time they get to you. And so as your trainer, you have to adapt to where they're feeling at that point.
Yeah.
On a more personal scale, you have to kind of adapt to yourself. If you wake up with less energy, then you have to kind of manage your schedule that way as well.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I completely agree. And I think that there are some ways I've been trying to balance that as well too in my life. And this is going to make me sound like I'm a complete maniac, but like I'm going to 100% sound like I'm like Patrick Bateman here or something. But like I set up my day around like concrete routines that I'll like hold to a T. And I actually eat like mostly the same thing for every single meal. Like I'll have the same breakfast every single day. I'll have the same lunch. I'll have the same dinner. And it's this like that structured routine just allows me to like get the most out of my day and to like optimize my day while also just relieving like the decision fatigue of like having to decide like, what am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? I think I also have a lot of like dietary restrictions as well too. So just being able to know I have like a good high energy meal that's going to meet my macros, that's going to help give me this really like positive fuel to get me through the rest of the day. And then I just don't need to think about it. Like that also helps as well too. So
decision fatigue is definitely a big issue. That's why a lot of CEOs wear the same outfits each day and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh man, I've been seeing that too. Like building just like a capsule wardrobe, just having a bunch of button downs. Honestly, I could see myself doing that sometime in the future too. So
I don't feel like I waste too much energy on what I'm going to wear. Like I might think about what shirt I'm going to use, but generally speaking, I just kind of grab whichever one feels right. I don't have to think about it as much. It's more of emotional, so that's kind of nice. But when it comes to food, I actually kind of understand you, the psychotic aspect of it, is having that same thing every day. I'm joking. But the thing is, I was like thinking about maybe I should just have eggs for lunch every day. So that way I can get enough protein, call it a day, and just not worry about it. Because I just need, I don't enjoy eating anymore at this point. Ever since I became a personal trainer and around that age, I was also doing more bodybuilding stuff. And the thing is, you have to, in order to gain weight, you have to eat more. And that's hard to do. And you might understand that a lot of people don't seem to get it. Like as a hard gainer, I wasn't able to gain weight. And I had to force feed myself some days. I'd sit there and just force oatmeal down my throat. But that's how I had to do it. And I just sit there, take a scoop of oatmeal, take a drink of water, and wash it down.
Oh God, I feel that. Yep.
And the thing is, that helped me get to a more healthy weight. It wasn't that I was unhealthy per se, but I was burning so many calories that I couldn't keep up with my day.
Right.
Oh, and so by simplifying your diet and simplifying your habits, definitely makes sense.
Definitely. And that was one of the things I think I first learned about that too. I read this really great book a couple years ago called The Residents. And it was this really interesting in-depth look at how presidents sort of organize and structure their day. So it went as far back as like Jimmy Carter and then through the Obama administration. And it talked about how a lot of what the management staff that like is actively curating the president's schedule and like curating what they're eating every day or where they're going, that a lot of what they try and do is relieve a psychological phenomenon called decision fatigue, that we have to make so many choices and we get to a point where we get too tired of making choices to make any more. And so a lot of the ways that they do that is they're like, we need the president to be making as many good choices as possible. So we're going to relieve, some of this like extra decisions that they would need to make by just having a bunch of like pre-approved meals or things like that. And it sounds like there is just like a really great way that is a really great way to sort of just like improve efficiency as well too, is just you have sort of this like, oh man, it sounds like life is an optimization
It
game,
is.
but
It really is, though.
yeah,
I was even thinking about that on a walk. I've been trying to do a walk every day for a long while now. Over the
good
course of like
idea.
quarantine, when I first started doing these interviews, I was walking almost every day. Me and my roommate both actually were walking almost every day, purely
That's
because we needed to get outside, touch grass
yeah.
kind of thing. And the habit sort of faded over the last couple years, and then this past year or so I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I need to do it again. I used to go on these podcast walks, and so I started listening to more
Yeah,
podcasts or audiobooks because I was going on walks. So in
I love
Atomic
it.
Habits they talk about habit stacking, so you bring those things
Yeah,
together to help make it easier to get it done.
definitely. Oh man, I love it. And I feel like walking, you come up with so many good ideas on a walk too. Like, that's a good habit right there.
And one thing to keep in mind too is the idea capture, so having a system to actually write things
Mm.
down.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, that's fantastic. I do try and journal a little bit, which I feel like helps with that, but the idea capture is a really cool idea.
It's not my idea. It's one of the things I've just heard over the years. Definitely having a digital system is really helpful. I think for nerds like us,
Oh,
especially. I personally
definitely.
just never get into like journals very much, but having like an actual knowledge management system on the
Yeah.
computer or phone, oof, we can go
Oh,
on a whole
definitely.
tangent on that. Before I move on though, there was one
Yeah.
thing that you were mentioning, like you were talking about presidents. I
Yeah.
looked at the way that polymaths scheduled their day.
Mm,
So like Da Vinci or
love that.
Benjamin Franklin. Franklin
Yeah.
especially is someone you might look into because the way he structured his day was as fascinating as is a case example kind of thing.
That's so cool. Okay, I will definitely look into that then. Oh man, I've heard a little bit about Da Vinci's wild days, especially he had a really interesting sleep cycle, didn't
Yeah,
he?
polyphasic. I think they both might have had it. That's another thing I looked into quite a bit was different sleep cycles. So most people
Yeah.
have that the monophasic where you just sleep the 8 hours or however many hours at night. And then another decent chunk of the population has a biphasic where you sleep a big chunk and then you might take a nap in
Mm,
the afternoon. And I kind of
yeah,
try to go more for that because I think naps really do help if you can do it right. You don't
that's
sleep
a
too long.
great. Yeah.
I took a 4 hour nap the other day because I was not feeling well, but a
Woo!
little too much. Uh,
That's so
but
fair.
a nice little 30-minute cat nap can make a big difference.
It can. It really can.
And
Oh,
then you get to the
definitely.
polyphasic sleep cycles, and those things are insane. Like they're still getting 8 hours, but they're sleeping 2 hour sets throughout the whole day,
Right.
or like four
Yeah.
times. It's crazy.
I've genuinely never tried that. Honestly, sleep is I feel like one of my weakest areas. It's just not great. I do not have it down pat as much as it could be. But I cannot
Optimization.
there
Sorry.
we go. Exactly. Really it's just if I have the discipline to
Yeah.
optimize my sleep schedule how I should too, because I'm a notorious like napper. I like
Hmm.
just will sleep into crazy levels, but I can't even imagine what your day would look like on a polyphasic sleep schedule. That must be amazing.
I don't do it per se, but I thought about it, and I heard it takes at least 2 to 3 weeks to kind of adapt to it, which is probably the
Mm,
hardest part of the process. It's kind of like
yeah,
getting into keto, where you have to really stick to it, even in the hardest
yeah,
points. And the thing is, it's almost kind of fascinating because I feel like it's probably more optimal because if you're getting 2 hours of sleep, you're gonna get your REM cycle. You're gonna like if
yeah,
it's especially if it's really optimized, you're gonna get
yeah,
your all phases of your sleep because you need like all 7 phases of the sleep in order
right,
to feel rested. And 2 hours is long enough to actually get all of those 7 phases. And so it's one
mm,
of those
mhm.
things where if you get that 4 times a day, then those times where you're awake, you're probably more efficiently awake because you got a well
Right,
rest
yeah.
more recently. So that's just
Oh,
what I think is really
that's so cool.
curious.
That is so cool. I feel like I would need like four separate breakfasts then. Well, too. I don't know. I love breakfast food. I'm 100% team butter and toast.
And second
So
breakfast.
there we go. There we go. Second breakfast. Exactly.
Well, prior to this conversation, and you mentioned it earlier, this idea of a-disciplinary, which isn't something we
Mm.
talk about too much on here. Can you explain it?
Yeah, definitely. So, this was a really interesting topic that actually it was my PhD advisor, always down to the horn of Dr. Arnav Jala. He's amazing. You should look up all the cool stuff he's done. But, you know, he was talking about it. I was like, I feel like I'm a really interdisciplinary learner, and that, you know, the areas that I want to work in just naturally require being really interdisciplinary. And he was saying, I actually would consider myself a-disciplinary. And I was like, what's that? That sounds so cool. And he was talking about how he had done a number of different, you know, sort of deep dives and research sessions into how dividing information up into disciplines can actually be a way of impeding academic progress as well too. We look at some of the greatest advancements made in philosophy and the arts and the sciences when we look at people like Aristotle, you know, or these really famous philosophers that dabbled in so many different interdisciplinary fields. And because I think a lot of what we do in the lab is very inspired by Aristotle in general, there is sort of this notion of, to what extent does, you know, just chopping things up into disciplines actually impede us from being able to get a really unique and, you know, wholehearted understanding, you know, full picture of what's really going on? Because disciplines are, at the end of the day, things that we made up to organize things. But at what point can we also let those organizational tools fade into the background when we need the strength of being able to see across multiple disciplines?
I think a great example is to like see from a specialist point of view, it's like a trench, right? You're deep in a trench, you have the walls around you, you can't see over that trench because they can't see over that trench. But when you see things from a more adisciplinary or multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, whichever term really kind of floats your boat, because they really kind of all not really mean the same thing, but they all kind of mean the same thing. They're more like trees with branches, and those branches cross paths, and you can almost think of it like a little squirrel going from your branch to that other branch to another tree. And so it's more of like a forest of knowledge, whereas if you are a specialist, you have a trench, maybe two trenches, but they're still not that connected.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great visual. I like that a lot. And I like that visual sort of connotates too, that being in the trench makes it kind of hard to see what's in other trenches as well too, you know. And I think that that's sort of where a disciplinarianism kind of comes from, which, like, I'm so down for organizational tools. I'm all about optimizing organization, but I think it is important to illuminate that sometimes we organize too much, and actually keeping things a little messy can be really good too.
The balance of order and chaos.
There we go. The universe seems to have it down pretty good. I think it's us that have to figure it out still.
Entropy and all that. So in your TEDx talk, you mentioned, let's bring back the Renaissance, everyone. How do you see that happening?
That's a great question. Well, I think, touching on something you mentioned earlier, I think that the internet and the digital age is going to be great for that. I do think that we are able to connect and talk with people and organize information in just infinitely different ways now. And that means that we are going to be able to cater to more interdisciplinary communities. I think it also means that like-minded people are going to be able to connect more. You know, I feel like part of why I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast is that I'm getting connected to such an amazing group and community of people who see the world the way a polymath would. And so we find each other, you know, we hear what works for everybody else, and we sort of trade hobbies and habits and organizational structures. And that's something that just wouldn't have been possible, you know, when the internet was not a thing. You would just have to sort of like hope that someone was like a local Da Vinci or Ben Franklin, and that you were just going to stumble upon them. So my hope is that we will move towards a more interdisciplinary world. And I guess, you know, programs like Duke's program, 2 department, or PhDs in general can be very interdisciplinary, and they're very tailored to the individual. I think that programs that, like, you know, they have to have their divisions, they have to have their individual distinctions, but allow for a lot of interdisciplinary work within that distinction, it gives me hope that, you know, we as a society are going to continue moving towards more interdisciplinary areas. And I think those of us who are sort of in the polymath world are hoping to move towards doing that. And we're learning how to do that. And then when we learn how to do it, other people learn how to do it. And then all of a sudden we've got a bigger community of people who work interdisciplinary in interdisciplinary ways. And hopefully that garners enough attention for someone to be like, the Renaissance person is back.
Yeah. It seems that overall, that's kind of what's happening. It seems like that's actually the kind of trajectory. I definitely like how on this show, being able to talk to people like you, it's definitely helps me think differently, and people who are listening in. I try to encapsulate that mental model that you might
Yeah.
employ, because each person's a bit different, and it's just interesting. I actually want to do like a written version of each interview, and
Oh, I
essentially
love
it's I get a summary, you have every little bit else that you would have in a blog post for a podcast, but in the middle it has the mental model that I
that. Oh,
write out
cool.
about the person. Like, here's what I think the mental model is from this episode, and I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. I might even compile it into a
Definitely.
book down the line too.
Oh, I love that. Honestly, if you ended up publishing something like Atomic Habits, but like specifically for polymaths, like, oh, I would see
Send
that
it
on
your
the
way.
fucking charts. Like, I would buy that so fast. I would hope to be a beta reader. Like, I
Yeah.
would want to read that before it hit shelves and then like, oh my God, you won't know this amazing author that I know. I love that idea.
Well, and it's Tim Ferriss has a book called Tools of Titans where he basically talked to
Mm,
different big leaders and or just big idea people. And essentially, the book is more like a toolbox where if you have a problem, you
oh,
go to a certain person for that particular problem. And I feel
yeah.
like this book is kind of more like that, where if you have a certain mental model that you need, you can learn from that person who has that mental model. I feel like that's
Yeah,
kind of a
yeah.
unique way of going about it.
Oh, definitely. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's fantastic.
It'll be a minute before that comes out. I still got to get my swimming book out, but I digress. Something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I feel like the math undergrad in me loves that math is in the title. I feel like growing up, I don't know. I always heard that like people should become established in like the three core areas of genius. This is so stupid, but like chess, mathematics, and music. And I think I took to that too much as a kid. And I was like, I got to try my hand at all three because then maybe I can do something really cool one day. But then, in doing those three, sort of like intersecting worlds, and I sort of started splicing art in with music, and you start
Mm-hmm.
just seeing everything melding together. And I mean, I feel like our generation grew up with the rise of the digital age as well too. So we were watching that happen in front of us. I was seeing something the other day. It was like, do you remember like in the early 2000s when you would just go to a person's house and you would just like sit in front of the computer with them all day? It's like our main like hangout activity is like, let's just experience the internet together or something. And I was like, I love that because that really was what it was like growing up in the digital age. But I feel like being a polymath to me was just almost like allowing the lines between those different areas that I started building up in my life to blur. I think that it helped that colleges were always like, we want really well-rounded applicants. And I would sort of use that to like convince myself of like, oh, see, it's okay to be a bit of a jack of all trades, like I'm going to just, this will just, help me get into college more. But then once I got into college, I was like, oh, I actually don't want to stop doing all of these different things. And I very much want multiple of these things to be in my life. And I think it was just sort of learning to adapt to let myself see the world in that interdisciplinary way. That might be a little complicated. I know I'm a little all over the board with that response there, but I think
If
that's what I think about polymath.
it
So,
felt like it flowed right, at least in my understanding. Maybe it takes more polymathic mindset to understand.
yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
One thing to keep in mind too is that the polymath word has nothing to do with mathematics. A lot of people hear
yeah.
polymath, they're like, "Oh, math!" Like, no, it's just math is the Greek word for like area of this knowledge, or
I
essentially,
like that.
and poly meaning much or many, so many areas of knowledge.
I love it. I
And
love it.
so it's interesting you mentioned that like music and chess and mathematics. They say that mathematics is the language of the universe, music is the language of emotion and people, and then chess is a great example of strategy and how minds can process more logic. And so between all three of those, you can learn a lot
Yeah.
about existence that way.
I love that. I love that. I feel like that's the best way of summarizing all of it too. And even though I mention all three of those, I need to mention I am a very average chess player. I'm not very good. I still have a lot of a way to go. And for now, I'll just enjoy watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix and pretending that I'm good at it. So,
Kind of reminds me of watching Suits, like, oh, I know law.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Pivoting a bit, can you explain what narrative artificial intelligence is?
Yeah, definitely. You'll probably have to cut me off at some point. I will not be able to stop talking about this. So I feel like narrative artificial intelligence is sort of tied. So it came out of the early 1980s development of video games, which a lot of video games, a lot of people don't know this, were really inspired by choose your own adventure books that were really kind of pioneered through, I think we maybe had some as early as the 1930s, maybe through to the 1970s. Essentially, these books where you would read a chapter and then they would say, if you choose to do this, go and keep reading on page 86.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose to go and do this, keep reading on page da 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 da. And so essentially, you'd be able to like read the book, but in a way that your choices paint the narrative. And when the computer exploded and we started getting graphics and we started thinking about computers as like a way to have sort of entertainment, a lot of people were like, how could we turn some of these, sort of choose your own adventure narratives into stories? And that's sort of where video games erupted from, this sort of idea of how do we tell a story, but also have people's individual decision making be really acknowledged and, supported? Or how can we have someone make a choice and that actively changes the course of that story? So that's where we get this really interesting area called narrative AI. Originally, it was just called interactive narratives or narrative intelligent technologies, which really started with how do we prioritize player choice? How can we have player choice inform the direction of a narrative? And how can we have stories be interactive? In video games. But all of a sudden, it continued to develop more and more into realizing, oh, there's a really strong psychological precedent for the fact that narratives are specifically designed to be optimal forms of human communication, and that many people psychologically think of their life as a narrative. They understand things through stories. I mean, the way we learn things growing up is through fairy tales and parables that tell us what to do and what not to do. So the idea of learning and intelligence is innately tied to story and therefore story structure. So this really interesting area of intelligent narrative technologies had already established essentially systems models, or like computation systems engineering models for stories, for plot points, for characters, this really computational understanding of how we tell stories, and then had, adapted it for storytelling. But now we look at it and we're like, okay, but how could we actually now use a lot of these technologies, build on them, and actively teach computers the same way we teach, kids to learn how to do things by telling them stories? So I guess narrative AI is really known for being able to focus on how to create optimal stories, finding and creating programs that could beta test stories or writing. ChatGPT is the buzzword that everybody likes to say, sort of falls into the narrative AI space right now, as well as just, I know my research is sort of focused in around how we could use narrative artificial intelligence to optimize hurricane evacuation warnings, that instead of just hitting people with a barrage of just information and data that they're not able to contextualize and saying, get out of there as fast as possible, if we convey it in the structure of a story, that information psychologically is going to be intaken or took into the mind a lot easier and better received. And because of that, we would hopefully see higher evacuation rates and less deaths due to weather-based disasters.
It's almost like you're incorporating that just human mindset. One thing that pops to mind is Simon Sinek's TED Talk, where it's like start with why, is why, how, and what, and that's how people do marketing. It's like you start with that why, get them hooked in. You tell them what, like here's how to do it, and then the what is like what is actually going on, and then they can actually focus on the what because they already know the why and how. They don't have to worry about it as much, and so they can focus on it.
Exactly.
And I actually kind of incorporate that in my blog posts when I write, especially my swimming ones. I have that kind of flow, and that way people can understand the philosophy behind it, then maybe the physics behind it, and then perhaps the psychology at the end.
Yeah. Oh, that is fantastic. Oh, I love that so much. And I think being someone who like was sort of in the polymath space, I sort of came upon this field. It was really hard to find. And there's really not a lot of people in the narrative AI space right now, but it is growing. Because a lot of it is still kind of pulling itself out of the game dev space at the moment. But a lot of it was that I was in math classes and I was also creating creative writing projects at the same time. And I would look at how those creative writing projects were structured and how they had these sort of like interlocking systems and causality. And it was sort of this like, how could you model this with mathematics? If mathematics is the language of the universe, narratives are the language of the human mind. So there should be a way that the two intersect. And at least for me, narrative AI was that intersection that I managed to find. And they're now just dedicated to finishing a PhD in it. So
I have heard from so many PhD people recently, like, I just need to finish my PhD.
Oh my God, it's really like that. And we'll be saying it, we'll be like 7 years in, like, I still gotta finish it. So yeah, it's kind of grueling, but I like to say it's like your Yoda training arc, that you're like becoming a stronger Jedi or something like that too.
So with narrative AI and the hurricane tracking, like you said, the communication, where else do you see, besides just hurricanes, this intersection of knowledge applying into the world? Because obviously that's your focus and that's what you're most experienced or excited about per se. But where else do you see it being applied?
Yeah, definitely. I really think that, as with applications of any type of technology, the sky is the limit. If you can think of an application, it's going to exist. But I think that the really strong ones that come to mind, at least in my opinion, are communications issues. Generally, I think narratives are just culturally designed and optimized to be perfect ways to communicate information to people really fast and effectively. And so I think that narratives and narrative computation has a really great potential for producing assistive technology to help in solving major communications problems. I think it could be really useful in an advisory capacity when it comes to political decision making as well too. I definitely am very much an advocate for the fact that AI and tech should never fully replace a human. And I have some ideas about maybe thinking that like AI sentience is not fully ethical, but I really do think that creating assistive technologies, technologies that are designed to assist the human decision maker in making the best possible decision, oftentimes ones that don't necessarily need to have a math background, or a computational background, that we can create those programs that can spit out and provide that data when it's needed, to who it's needed, to help make really high risk decisions, whether that be in politics, whether that be in like emergency weather response, communications, politics. And I also feel like, being a creative writer, that there's some really interesting advantages to the publishing world that are underexplored in narrative AI. I think, as someone who's been querying and looking to get my book picked up, I'm learning about how the lit community really could do for some good software updates. That's what I'm going to say. We got some gronky web pages that we're working with. But I also think that, narrative AI could help beta test ideas for writers. It could help provide new story ideas or new plot structures. Like, narrative AI works a lot on creating what's called narrative planners, which can help people plan out their book or plan out their movie or movie industries. People like Disney are starting to lean more on the computational end of sort of beta testing and predicting how well their programs are going to do. And so maybe being able to create a platform where you could get an idea of how well your book would be received by certain communities, or even how your book might not be well received by certain communities, could be really illuminating and help you fix and tweak a narrative so that it's, applicable and interesting to more people, or in many cases even like less offensive to certain groups as well too. I think these programs could aid in sort of that like sensitivity reading that we're seeing now more and more in the literary community. I think that these could provide really assistive technologies, not only to just optimizing communication, but also helping you make the best artistic product that you can do as well too.
I think you're definitely right on that. And going a little bit more broad too, people keep thinking like, oh, AI is going to replace me. AI is going to replace me. No, people with AI might replace you, probably will. But like,
Yeah.
AI itself is not going to replace you, at least not for another 20 years. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about how you were mentioning how like a creative can use AI to help flesh out their stories.
Yeah.
I did that actually this year.
Right.
Because essentially at the beginning of the year, at the like last 2 days of December, I was messing with ChatGPT finally. I finally got around to it.
Right.
And I decided to ask it, like, what is a polymath to you, like I do in my show? And then on top of that, I started asking me different questions and started talking about the modular degree. But eventually, I got to this idea of making my own Pokemon-like game, this Phasivos.
Right.
And I started
Yeah.
fleshing out the different plots and story and quests through this tool. It's like, I'm not using it to write the story per se. I'm not even using it to write the quests. I'm using it to come up with the ideas so that I can go in and just not have to burn energy on just coming up with the ideas and just focus more on
Yeah.
writing good story.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. No, and I do also agree with you. I do think that we are many years away from any AI takeover worries as well too. But no, I love that though. And I love that you were able to like experiment with ChatGPT. And I feel like some of the most interesting parts of ChatGPT that I've been seeing has been people going in and talking about it with really interesting topics and trying to get its opinion and trying to see if it can develop an opinion. I hope that makes it into any hypothetical book that you write about polymaths too.
Yes. Take a note. What led you to create Freshly Squeezed Pulp?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh. Honestly, a really silly discussion that I had over dinner with two of my college friends, Win and Daniel. So we had been joking around, and our friend Daniel had been like, oh, I recently watched Disney's Tarzan. I wonder how off Tarzan is from its like original novels. Cause like everybody knows Disney tends to mess up storylines a lot. And Win sort of pulls it up on their phone and is like going through the plot summary and is like, oh my God, there were 24 Tarzan novels. These plot lines are absolutely ridiculous. And we were just reading through this, and we were all really avid podcasting fans. Win and I both really loved the Thrilling Adventure Hour, which sort of recontextualized like classic sort of radio hour radio dramas with a lot of really prominent voice actors. And we had been like, this would make such a killer comedy podcast. And I think I was just like dying for a creative project at that point. I was just swimming in math, and I was like, I need something creative writing. And I was like, guys, we're going to do this. Like, I am going to have us do this. And so we started it, and honestly, some of my closest lifelong friends I met in the group, just an incredible group of people, an incredible team of people who were just working together to really produce this amazing, goofy comedy podcast in the style of old time radio. Even though I love to talk about narrative AI and everything, I do think that that genuinely was one of the most like rewarding life experiences that I've had is Freshly Squeezed Pulp. And then we got the opportunity to take it pro and get the Tarzan author's official estate to like license it, and it became a real podcast. And I think that was the first time that I really thought like, oh, maybe I can do something in the professional writing world. Like maybe I could be an artist too. And it was a really eye-opening experience, and I'm hoping that it got to be eye-opening for other people as well too. But it was also really exciting because I feel like Tarzan set the precedent for a lot of also problematic tropes and stereotypes in the world of literature, in the world of media. It inspired a lot of classic sort of adventure pulp fiction and what we would consider like classic adventure films like Indiana Jones or The Mummy today. And so by going in and doing sort of like a comedy retelling of it and going through and making some modernization changes, it was like we were actively able to make some commentary on some of the tropes and some of these stereotypes and revitalize them in a better way that also ideally sort of brought things to a much more diverse audience and let people see that the adventures of yesteryear are now the adventures of today, and they're not just for the everyman, that they're for anyone who wants to partake in adventure as well too. So it was a really, really great experience.
I'm glad that was such a good experience for you. And it's interesting too to think about the balance. Like you definitely need to have your creative and your more science side. And I definitely think that's a common theme on the show too, is having the balance between those two in some shape or
Yeah.
form. And something I was going to mention earlier, but I feel like this kind of applies here. I kind of feel, at least like for me, but even for other people, that it goes in cycles where 1 or 2 weeks I'm in a creative mode, 1 or 2 weeks I'm in a more learning mode, like so input versus output. And I wonder if it's kind of the same way when it comes to science and more like scientific and more philosophy or creative. And so it's one of those things where like, okay, what is the cycle and how do I manage that?
Yeah. That's so fair. And that's a great question. I definitely feel that internally as well, too, that it's like it is like weather, like you were talking about, that sometimes you just wake up and you're in more of a creative mood, and sometimes you're in more of a science mood. I think in my life right now, I don't have the flexibility that I would like to just be able to like dive into something based off of how I feel. I think I'm trying to build that lifestyle for myself, but I'm just not there yet. And I do think that that is the ideal for the polymath. But at least what has been working for me now is I try to sort of I get like a little bit of everything in every week. And if like, say my writing day is Sunday and I'm really vibing with a writing idea on Wednesday, maybe I'll try and fit in a tiny little bit, of writing where I can squeeze it in. And I also have totally like blown my sleep schedule. If I get really inspired, I'm just like, okay, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and I'm gonna follow this. But there's part of it too that I'm like, I sometimes like imagine it as like I have a little like rechargeable battery. Like, okay, I'm charging it up with this energy and I'm gonna release this energy on Sunday. And that works okay. But like I said, I feel like I'm working towards being able to just go with how I feel and have that freedom. And I really do think that like in this sort of post-pandemic world where we're considering how jobs could look different ways and how it doesn't just mean showing up to an office in the 9 to 5, my hope too is that for other polymaths, maybe there would be ways that we can sort of design our work days around how we work as well too. That would be my hope as well.
I feel like an entrepreneurial mindset helps a little bit on that too. It's because if you take more control and have like your own business, that might be one way to do it. But keep in mind too, we're both still young, right? Like we have plenty of time, and it's just one of those things where we're more along the lines of proto polymaths at this case.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think about just the passage of time and how our systems optimize over the course of decades.
Definitely. And like you were saying, maybe we'll see some culture shifts too that allow it to be a little bit more accessible than, our world that has been really post-industrial age focused in on specification as opposed to, being interdisciplinary.
Well, and this definitely leads to my next question pretty well. For someone like you with so many knowledge in so many areas, the knowledge management is a key factor. Kind of mentioned that earlier. How do you organize your information? Is it just journals or?
I love this question. This is so good. And I feel like I have to like give credit where credit's due. I feel like I learned a lot of different ways to store information from different people online as well too. There's some really great YouTubers that I follow that are focused in on like productivity or like, how to organize large quantities of information. But I think it's all about finding the system that works for you. I am a really big proponent of bullet journaling. That works really well for me, which one of my best friends was actually telling me that bullet journaling, which is essentially you basically make your own kind of planner and you structure that around every day. And sometimes you have little things that you track, like I like to write a line a day, or I'll track how much water I've had, or how much sleep I've gotten, or what my mood is. And then I can do the fun little data science things later of seeing, like how is mood correlated to sleep that I've gotten or something like that. But one of my best friends was saying that bullet journaling actually came up originally to help people who were looking at things from a more neurodivergent perspective and sort of plan things, that it came out of a lot of people with ADHD wanting to find planners that were more structured around the ways that they thought, which is different than how a lot of people think. And I do think that I fit into the category of acquired neurodivergence just based off of my life experiences. And so I really enjoy the ability to sort of custom design my own, journal that works for me, a journal where I can record inspirations and thoughts and, things that I'm interested in, or oftentimes I like printing out like little stickers. If you know me, one thing, I'm just so obsessed with stickers. It's a problem actually. And just putting things that I like to look at in there as well too, so that I can sort of be like aesthetically inspired by something while I'm writing my daily to-do list in the journal. And I think my life goal is that when I die, I want someone to like open my journals and be like, damn, she really was crazy. Like, this is a crazy person. Like that would be my goal. I think those bullet journals accomplish that very well. I did have a mentor take a look at them, and she was like, yeah, you're actually kind of crazy. Like, this is a little insane. But I'm like, hey, that's my vibe. That's how I'm doing things. And it works really well for me. I do think that I need to get better when it comes to digital sort of organization. I think I've got just dusty hard drives lying in the
No
corner
pun
that
intended,
could,
right?
yeah. There we go. There we go. They could just be much better repurposed.
Mhm.
I do think I saw something online that was like a girl's notes app has more plot developments than an A24 movie, and I was like, I love that. I want this like on my gravestone. But I do think I need to come up with a better organization tactic than just automatically turning to the Apple Notes app. I know you're a Notion user, or no, you were thinking you used Notion for a little bit and then you switched, right?
And I might have switched again.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh. Okay. You'll have to tell me what you switched to, but I feel like we both tried out Notion and we switched for very similar reasons due to like it needing to be connected to the internet at all
Yeah.
times.
Well, and that was an issue. It was also an issue of performance where my databases got so big that like they would lag. And
Yeah.
it was the only databases I had to really worry about was my input, my modular degree, and my output, which is
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
content. And I needed to be able to scroll through. Ironically, I almost went back to Notion because of just the way the calendar view is. So
Perfect.
I think we were talking about that a little bit the last time we chatted, and definitely like hit me up if you want to know more about knowledge management. I could definitely give you a lot more
Definitely.
tips on that. But I moved to Capacities, which is
Mm-hmm.
a web-based tool, which is frustrating.
Okay.
But I tried a couple other ones along the way. Obsidian was really great for note taking, and it's kind of like Jupyter Notebooks, where it's really great for just a
Oh,
lot of
cool.
scientists and like scientist mind, because it's kind of like an alternative to Rome Research too. And it's one of those things where I liked Obsidian, but there was no way in hell I could plan my content in there. I looked at
That's so
every single plugin multiple times. All
yeah.
1,000 plugins that they had, I looked at them,
Yeah.
and none of them were going to be able to help me plan out my content because the calendars didn't work,
Okay.
and the database ones, the plugins just really didn't work, literally at
Yeah.
all. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to move somewhere else. But definitely, I was actually thinking about designing my own at this point because I created my
Oh,
own.
that'd be so cool.
I created my own system instead of a second
Yeah.
brain or Life OS. I created my own,
Right.
but I almost think I need to create an actual tool underneath that, which would be interesting.
That would be amazing. I would 100% be one of your first users. I have to ask, do you like HTML and CSS? Because I feel like that's the kicker question in there.
Those are the only coding that I can probably do at this point.
Okay, then you're the man that like the entire computer science industry needs because we
Or
all
back
hate.
end. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
if someone can help me design the database, whether it's like SQL or Node or whatever, like hit me up on the back end. I can do front end stuff probably. We'll go into
I
fake
love
that.
it. I love it. I'll have like 5 computer scientists email you right away.
I won't. I will say I'm not necessarily much of a coder unless I'm. Yeah,
No,
yeah. We'll go one final question and we'll wrap up here.
sure
I
thing.
saw in a few different places, and you mentioned it at the beginning too. You have an interest in anthropology, and so what is one of your favorite lessons you've learned in that subject?
That is such a good question. I know I keep saying that, but that's because all of these are really, really good questions. But okay, so one of the like sticks with my undergrad PhD dissertation is they were like, you're required, if you're going to get the bachelor's of science, you need to have some sort of like biological
Mm.
science, like psychology, poli sci. Those don't count. You need to have something like bio, something that's really STEM based. And for me, my choice was evolutionary anthropology because my uncle, the only other scientist in my family when I was growing up, was a primatologist who studied chimpanzee language communication, which was really cool. And I would, one summer, I went off and was at his lab, which was the Language Research Center at Georgia State, I believe, or Atlanta. It was located in Atlanta. It was an amazing primate research center. And we were focused in on better understanding how humans could communicate with chimps.
Mm.
And it was this really amazing experience. And I didn't realize it until afterwards, but I totally got like told that I was like Jane from Tarzan when I got back to high school. And that was so prophetic. Like I should have seen that coming because then I played Jane in FSP's Tarzan. But I think one of the things that really stood out, and it was like this moment that really inspired me to sort of keep a vein of evolutionary anthropology in my studies going forward, was that so my uncle had worked with this chimp named Sherman for most of his life. Sherman, I believe, was born in captivity, and my uncle was like a family member to Sherman. And so my uncle was like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to Sherman and like, see if you can like play this game where you run around his enclosure with like a carrot and see if he follows you. And Sherman gave zero fucks. He's like, who is this girl? I'm not like, this grass is way more interesting than whoever that is. And then my uncle then reintroduced me using what's called lexicograms, which are this sort of pictorial language that's used to communicate with chimps. So sign language has been used before, and my uncle actually worked with Pansy, the sign language gorilla, at some point. I think I'm getting that right. I hope so. But he then introduced me to Sherman using the pictograph for family. And all of a sudden, Sherman was paying so much attention to me. Any type of attention that he was giving to my Uncle Charlie, he was giving to me as well, too. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me then was that family not only means something in the animal community, but it's also something that's not necessarily, I guess, like tied directly to blood. That like that bond of family, that bond of human community, that it crosses species, that is something that we all look for. And it was just this really amazing moment of realizing that, so many of the concepts that we talk about in human cognition do come from, a lot of our animalistic evolution. And that's so interesting to trace back the complexities of our thoughts, our emotions, our cognition to how we evolved to survive the crazy natural world as well too. So that was a really eye-opening experience, and I feel like that's probably one of the best things that I've learned in the Evanth world.
You say that was a great question. That was a great answer. I didn't expect that much of a great answer, but I'm glad it came out that smoothly. It's one of those things too. It kept making me think of humans' ability to pack bond as well, and how over the course of our history, like obviously wolves to dogs and stuff like that, but even just herd animals. And I see a lot of these like Reddit videos on TikTok, and a lot of them are sci-fi based, so you like that too. And there was one in particular that stuck out to me. It was just funny, but I really loved it. Basically, this human goes to an avian species planet where like all the people are more bird-like, and they're exploring in the woods. And so the guide is like flying overhead, and the human's walking through. And basically one of the most natural dangerous predators is showing up. And so the bird is like, whoa, like, hey, we gotta like step back, human, like we should get out of here. And it's like some six-legged mammal kind of beast.
Oh, dang.
And then the human just sits there and like gets in front of the animal and boops its nose. And the bird person is just like freaking out. It's stunned. And then the human realizes, oh, is there something stuck in your teeth? Let me get that out for you. Mind you, like razor sharp teeth, stuff like that. Gets it out. And then the animal gets really excited and goes on its side once at the rub his belly. And so the person is like freaking out in the air. It's like, how did this happen? And it's like, and the human's like, if not friend, then why friend shaped? And it's just like, that definitely seems like humanity to me.
That is great. I need to be on that Reddit thread. Like, that is fantastic. Oh, I love that. I love that. And just seeing those moments when cognition lines up, across species. One of my best friends is a PhD student studying evolutionary anthropology, and she studies the anthropology of like dog domestication. And oh man, she's just like, I swear she can actually communicate with dogs. Like, she just knows where all of the cognition points line up. And it's really amazing. We really have so much more in common with like our animal friends than we don't have in common. So there's a lot we can learn from them.
It's a great lesson. Well, wrapping up here, where can people find you online?
Oh, definitely. So totally feel free to check me out on my website at adventuresinalgorithms.com. Don't know how I managed to snag that domain name, but I'm very happy to have snagged that domain name while it was not crazy expensive. But that's sort of my research blog as well as my creative writing space. I will sort of post both about my endeavors in creative writing and my current research that's going on. I have sort of a contact page if you want to reach out and chat. I always like to talk with people and people who are interested in a lot of these topics, as well as if you're interested in learning more a little bit about my background. I've got sort of like my CV and stuff on there as well too, if you want to take a look. Other than that, I guess my TEDx talks are up there if you want to take a look. Though I feel like every time I'm speaking publicly about my TEDx talks, I need to remind, just like I was telling you, they cut out the ums and the uhs. And like I also I know they're
I
gonna
do
like
that here
ban
too. People are gonna be like, "You didn't say I'm around this whole time." It's like, yeah, I cut it out. But
but oh man, oh man, they're great. But I also was 100% terrified before I went on stage as well too, which I feel like a lot of people see TED Talks and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so put together. And you're like, you don't see that half of us are trying not to throw up backstage.
Yeah.
Like that is how it is. So like, but those are a great way to sort of not only see what I study, but also see some of the progression, because I did one when I was a lot younger, and then I did one at the end of college. But I'm trying to think. I'm on Instagram. I make some funny memes about content that I study sometimes, and just have general updates over there. But other than that, I think those are my main places.
Well,
So
I got links in the description, so we don't have to worry about that too much. And it's a great call to action to
awesome.
go contact you or find your stuff. What could be a call to growth for the audience today?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I guess question to you: what do you consider a call to growth?
Well, I used to do like what's a call to action, and usually people like, hey, go get my book or go read my blog, something like that. And I would
Mm-hmm.
want kind of something like I want someone a lesson for people to do or some kind of
Yeah.
way of personal growth. And so I added the second one there. So we have a call to action. I didn't ask you because you already basically answered it with your other one. But the call to growth is something along the lines of like, hey, what can I do today, in your opinion,
Mm,
that can
yeah.
help improve my life or help improve anyone
I
who's
love
listening in?
I love that. Okay, here's a good one. Think about your favorite character from a novel or a movie or a book or a
Mm,
game, and figure out one thing that they do that you don't do, and think about if there's a way to incorporate it in your life. You might enjoy it a lot more than you think you would.
I like that. Well, once again, this is Dustin Miller, Polyinnovator, and Madeleine Gagne on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dustin. This is so much
It
fun.
was.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm.